Welcome, Jenna, to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi, Erica. Thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, so great. So I want to just jump in. I want to know what your morning routine looks like right now, and does it stay consistent? Does it change? What is that looking for you at the moment?
That's such a great question. So for me, actually, my morning routine has been a staple in my life for probably 5 years now. Ever since I've really been going on a journey of connecting with myself, it's been the one thing that's really kept me grounded through the wild waves that we've gone through in this journey. So it definitely has changed. Um, But I really do try to stay committed to the process of doing it daily. Sometimes it's only 5 minutes, but sometimes it's literally 2 hours, just depending on where my energy's at and what I need. But the main things that I do, I like to really start with some sort of breath work. So I'm a big Wim Hof fan. I
Mm.
started doing that a few years ago, and it has been really transformational with my energy and just when I'm in anxious periods, being able to ground and come back to my body and come back to myself. So I usually start with some sort of breathing. Sometimes I also will do like a more feminine breath, like box breathing. If I'm like,
Mm.
okay, I don't need as much masculine like energy in my life right now. Let's really tap into the feminine and calm my nervous system. So I kind of play around with that. And then usually I jump into meditation. So I love meditation. It is something that has completely transformed my life. I think that sometimes meditation can look like sitting out in the grass in silence and listening to nature. But sometimes I'm
Mm.
also very intentional with the type of meditation that I do.
Mm.
So, for example, something I'm really passionate about is the chakra system. And so, usually Monday through Sunday, I am going through each chakra center within myself. So, by the end of the week, I feel really balanced. Monday, I'm focused on my root and grounding. And fast forward to Sunday, I'm focused on my crown chakra and connecting with source and kind of tapping into that sacred spot in my life. So, it really varies throughout the week.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That
mhm.
is beautiful. I've never heard like anyone speak about meditating or focusing on each chakra per day per week. And like how fitting we have 7 days and like seven main chakras. That
Right?
is incredible. I want to like now I'm definitely going to take that practice and start to like apply that to my own life. But that I love that because it's like I feel like we get stuck onto like maybe one area or we don't give attention like a lot of us when we start in this journey want to like activate our upper chakras and then we like forget about
Mhm.
grounding in, and that's so cool to focus it on each day. I love that. But I also
Mhm.
resonate with morning routines are sometimes 5 minutes or 2 hours
Mhm.
because it's like I tune into also like what I need at the time. And I think that it's part of that feminine flow of like allowing yourself to give you yourself what you need. Whereas like instead of like my morning routine is X amount of time, and I do these amount of things and to have it more structured. So I think that's I definitely resonate that with that also because sometimes I'm a quick like, all right, this is I just need a quick tune in. And then other times I'm like, I need 2.5 hours to journal, to meditate, to write. So I feel that so much. How did you even start doing that? Like tune in with the chakras. What does that look like for you? Is it just like focusing on each energy center and meditating on that? Or do you do different practices related to each chakra each day? I'm just
Mhm.
curious.
Yeah, I love that question because it
Yeah.
has been a beautiful unfolding that I never really expected. I started learning about the chakras probably 3, 4 years ago. I found them very interesting, really just kind of started studying them without any intention or purpose with that. But it was about 2 years ago when I was deep in my spiritual journey. I had just moved to Mexico. I was actually in a really beautiful container with about 30 other women that was helping us to tap deeper into our intuition. It was like a 3 month long program. And one of the weeks we were focused on the chakras and learning how to do energy readings. And it something within me was just like, whoa, you need to pay attention here. And I just allowed myself to explore that interest. And so I was spending a few weeks like researching them deeply, like looking into different resources, writing down what I was understanding the deeper spiritual lessons, but also the physical connections with the chakras. And actually, my best friend, one of my best friends, Rachel, and we both have this passion for chakras. And so she was actually visiting me in Sayulita at this time. And we kind of started going on this process of like, all right, Monday is our root chakra day. We're going to be eating red foods. We're going to be eating grounding foods, sweet potatoes, beet juice. We're going to be focused on grounding ourselves, starting our week from a stable place. And Tuesdays, we're moving on to our sacral chakra and we're tapping into our sensuality, our personality, our creativity. And like, I just felt this energy building within myself. And so, initially it just started with like a little bit of intention and focus, but over the years, it's really developed into something beautiful. Like, I will maybe like when I move or I'm like in a new location, I will really focus on that root chakra and I won't just meditate on it. I will do practices. I'm like, okay, today I'm going to go walk barefoot in the grass. I'm going to feel the grounding. I'm going to sit and try to really feel into the safety and stability within myself. And so it's really unfolded into this beautiful journey. And I think when we can create a structure, like a weekly schedule, and I've also gone through like 7-week periods and each week focused on a different chakra, it allows our feminine energy to kind of move through that process. So it's that combination of having the structure of the masculine energy, like we're committed to doing this every day, every week. And then that feminine energy of like, let me see where this takes me. And it still surprises me how much it unveils within myself when I'm committed to showing up for myself in that way.
Yeah. Oh, that inner balance that you talk about is so key. And I've learned this on my journey recently of going on like one extreme to the other. Of like I was like super in the structure, not allowing any flow, and then I went immediately the other way to like, all right, let me just experiment with flow, and I float, and then I lost the structure. So I think having that, and I think a lot of us balance, it's always, that's the whole name of the game, is trying to find balance within ourselves. But I think, yeah, many of us can yo-yo each side of that. So to have like a structure for yourself, but to then just how you put it, to allow yourself to like flow within that container is just so beautifully put. It's like, that's where like our magic can happen, to show up for ourselves continuously, but then we can let that look differently, in different ways. But I think within those chakra systems, it's like, especially if someone's first starting out in like this exploration of self and on any parts of their journey, like going back to those chakra points of those grounding and connecting to our different energy centers, I think is so paramount, really, just to focus in on it. It's a good way to be like, all right, where am I needing more of this energy and not, or where am I not grounding at all? And then you're like, oh wow, the root chakra, I'm not doing any of this stuff. So I think that's really, really good to play with. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I want to ask about, what is your most recent or biggest expansion moment that you have experienced this far?
I love that question. So my most recent expansion moment. This is interesting because, I've been on a very deep journey the past couple of years of just discovering myself on a much deeper level. So a little bit of background is, most of my 20s, I was in a corporate career. I was doing very well at that. I was also taking a lot of medication at that time for my mental health. So I was on Vyvanse for ADHD and then an antidepressant for almost 10 years. And I was in such a structured life. I was living in Seattle. I had a great group of friends. Very, very grateful for that chapter in my life, but I was extremely disconnected from myself It's like I was just going through the motions and everything externally looked so great, but internally I was so anxious
Mm.
and so depressed and so disconnected and avoiding myself. And so, as many of us are experiencing right now, a few years ago, I just had this massive shift. And it was about a year and a half ago that I moved from Seattle and I moved to Mexico and I left my job. I started, building my own vision. And I really went into what you had mentioned earlier, that like feminine flow of just going with the flow in life.
Yeah.
And the past year and a half has been beautiful because I've been traveling the world and kind of allowing my heart to take me where I'm meant to go. And that has been such an expansion for me. And a lot of lessons have come up throughout that I wouldn't have been able to witness otherwise. And so the ironic thing about all of this is that the biggest expansion for me recently has actually
Mm.
been making the decision to put some roots down again.
Mm. Yeah.
So I recently landed here in Austin. I am like, getting an apartment, like moving my stuff again. And it's so funny how that can be such an expansion for us because I think sometimes the movement is so exciting, but it's also distracting. And so making that commitment to yourself internally, I feel like, okay, it is time for me to not only put roots down for community, to meet my people, but also just to be present with myself on a deeper level and commit to the vision that I have been blessed with. It's easy to kind of keep running around the world and exploring, but there's
Yeah.
like this calling for me to really make a decision to put those roots down. And so that has been very expansive. I've only been here for about 3 weeks, but it's interesting how much has come up in that 3 weeks already for me.
Wow. Yeah. That's really interesting because many of us think that growth happens in all of the changes and the moves, but like I like that you say that you're experiencing this way different type of growth where you're like, okay, no, I'm going to stay and anchor down and root in because it is that traveling, I've lived kind of a similar path this last year of just traveling and experiencing and things like that. And it is exciting and you do have a lot of growth from those chapters, but you have to be able to like I think that integration part afterwards of everything that you've done and everything that you've experienced that you have touched on is so important to be like, all right, I'm going to root in. But a lot of us, in my experience particularly, I sometimes will avoid that aspect of just like of grounding in and kind of staying in an area because I could, people can feel a little restless and I think that there's so much growth within that of being able to like, all right, this is my space now. And that's a big move to be able to like settle in and get another apartment and be like, this is my community now. And these are my roots. And so I can see how it's super expansive. How would you, I want to talk a little bit more about your journey getting off of those different medications and finding that path, finding that way that you have experienced, and what are some little things that you can pull out of your journey that if someone's like, shit, I'm on medication, or I'm in this stuck point within my life, how do I start to shift out the energy and make those steps to maybe live differently and more aligned?
Hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I feel really passionate about this topic. And the first thing that I want to share is that if you are on a journey of using medication as a resource right now, that is perfectly fine. Like, I fully support that. I think that using support resources, medication is important while we're going through our healing journey. But for me personally, it was probably about 3 years ago when I really started deepening within myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really, going more inward with my meditation. I was starting to really understand and take responsibility for some of the patterns. I was doing a lot of family healing. I was diving deeper into that path. And it was literally during a meditation. I was at a retreat and I had done a really deep breathwork session and dropped in a meditation after that. And I just had this download that basically remaining on medication was going to block my ability to connect deeper with my intuition, to connect deeper with source.
Mm.
And it was funny because I had kind of dabbled with the idea of getting off of medication. I was afraid because I grew up in a household where my mom also experienced very severe depression. My grandmother did. And I witnessed periods of people just being checked out of life for days.
Mm.
And so I was afraid that without medication, I wasn't going to have the energy or the strength to really move forward in life. And all of my doctors were saying, hey, listen, like, Wellbutrin has been around for 50, 60 years. Like, you can be on this for the rest of your life. So for me, it was a
Yeah.
massive comfort zone. And when I had that message come through, though, it was an immediate knowing of like, okay, I need to listen to this. Like my life is about to go in a different direction. And it was just such a deep knowingness that I
Mm.
really didn't have an option otherwise. And so, what I want to land with this point, though, is if anybody is on medication and you're hearing this right now, and if you are on a healing or a spiritual journey or just an exploration of yourself, what I feel like getting off of medication did for me was it allowed me to actually dive deeper into the root causes of my trauma that was keeping me at a certain level of my own personal growth, right?
Mm.
Because I feel like when we are taking something that is kind of numbing our highs and numbing our lows, I wasn't able to dive into what I
Yeah.
like to call the shadows of myself, which is nothing to be afraid of. It's something to actually honor because that is where our deepest healing takes place. And so it has been a wild journey. It has not been easy,
Mm.
but I feel if you really are feeling compelled to dive deeper into your own healing, to actually start transforming your subconscious thoughts. That was another thing. I wasn't able to witness my subconscious thoughts while I was on medication because like I wouldn't emotionally go there with myself.
Mm.
And so that has been very powerful. But the other thing I just want to say here too is that medication is meant to be a stepping stone for us. It's meant to be one of the tools in our tool sets to help us be able to do the deeper work. And so something that was really important on my journey was as I was on medication, I was going to therapy, I was joining communities, I was doing the
Mm.
work. And so when I made that decision to get off of them, I had the resources like my morning routine, like community to connect with, like my practices that was able to help regulate my nervous system and help with that transition off of it.
Yeah.
So it's a very personal journey for each person. And that's really just what my experience was.
Yeah. I think that, I have very similar views when it comes to medication. I view, and mine just comes from having a medical background. I haven't personally been on medications to help anything like that. But it is. I think it's one of those things that can be a tool in our tool belt, our toolbox of
Mhm.
what we can pull. And I think it's important what you had mentioned of getting to the root cause of what it is instead of continuously masking that, and how you put like how oh I don't how I would love to go back and I'll find the clip of what you said, but masking like the highs and the lows, and like we kind of like I feel like many of us think that life in general is just this kind of like we should feel like a sense of calmness and stay in this kind of middle ground, and that's like where we the feeling should be. And I think if you really experience those highs and lows, you can feel like, wait, this is too intense, this is too much, I need to not be feeling these variety of emotions this deeply. But like that's part of being able to be human and really feel
Mhm.
those different chapters. So to let yourself feel the lows, move through the emotions, to be able to cry, to be able to express, and then feel the highs. And that's like where we can actually live out this like fully vibrant life instead of trying to stay at this kind of consistent, like, in betweenness. So I really like how you had put that. I think it's important to use to utilize when you need it, And then to be able to acquire these different aspects of what's going to help you move through those different chapters of your life. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that, especially the last few years that everybody's had to have it be so emotionally heavy. And I think a lot of people started to rely and utilize medication as a tool, but it isn't. Unfortunately, sometimes our system, just the way that your doctor had prosed, oh, you could be on this for the rest of your life, that really shouldn't be kind of any kind of quote on any kind of medication. Like these things are meant to be these temporary band-aids, but then we sometimes utilize them as permanent wraps, and then you forget to feel what you need to feel. So I think that's such an excellent journey to be on that. And I know many people and many friends that have been on this path to get off medication and have gone through different withdrawals and have different issues getting off of these based on the side effects and symptoms that they experience. So within your tools of like meditation and creating structure, and was it kind of like a slow process of getting off of these medications? Was it something that you can kind of just stop cold turkey, or was it kind of this gradual thing where you had to reduce doses or take them less? Like, I know everybody's journey will be a little bit different, but just to dive in a little bit more, if someone's really in the thick of wanting to get off of it, like what's like a first step you can kind of start with that conversation, maybe with your doctor or whatnot?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I am personally a very all or nothing person. I'm pretty intense, and I don't recommend this, but I did go cold turkey. And
Mm.
it wasn't actually because of choice. I was going to Florida to stay with someone for a few weeks as I made that decision, and I had forgotten my medications, and I was like, this is just the universe
Okay. Yeah.
showing me my strength.
Right.
But I absolutely recommend, like, that was really, really difficult on me mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And I definitely recommend tapering off and having a plan in place with your doctor. But from like a non-medical perspective, what I can really speak to in this is that it's really interesting what happened to me, because up until like 18, as a lot of us do, I had some trauma in my childhood. I learned how to compartmentalize. And so I really was putting all of this trauma like in a separate
Mm.
area of my mind and just pretending that it didn't really happen. And then when I was around 19, I got on all of this medication, and
Yeah.
although it allowed me to explore some of this deeper, I still felt pretty numb to my emotions. I remember there was a period where like I didn't cry for like 2 or 3 years. And I was
Yeah.
like, did I just lose my ability to feel?
Yeah.
And so the one thing that I noticed when I got off of all of the medication was like almost this deep purging of
Mm.
stuck emotions within my body. And so for a year, I was so sensitive. And I was also going through what I would call like a dark night of the soul, a spiritual awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so grateful for that moment, because it is what allowed me to go and hold and find compassion for myself in all of these areas that I had rejected for so long. And it allowed me to understand how important it is as a human to understand emotions.
Yeah.
I think that this
Yeah.
is such an epidemic that we're dealing with right now, the inability to feel emotions, because like you said, it's part of our human experience. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
like it adds vibrancy to life, but our emotions are also our guides. It shows us where we aren't putting up boundaries. It's showing us where we want to move towards. It's showing us how to operate in this beautiful journey of life. And if you're numb to that, you are missing out on how life is supposed to be. And
Yeah.
so, all of that said, to recommend that you prepare yourself to go deeper. It's going to be a beautiful journey for you, especially if you've been on it for a long period of time. And my recommendation, I know obviously we all enjoy the higher emotions, but there's also a lot of wisdom in like the lower vibration emotions, like
Mm-hmm.
when you're feeling sad or tired or jealous or angry. I find that if you are intentional about building resources to move through those energies, there's a lot of wisdom on the other side. It's where some of my most inspired ideas have come from, where realizations for very important conversations that have changed the trajectory of my life have come up,
Mm.
as well as just like understanding myself better. It's like, whoa, I actually don't like that thing. I think I'm going to create some boundaries, and that allows me to step into my most authentic version of myself. And so, um, there are so many resources out there, but learning how to be with your emotions is going to transform the way that this experience goes. Because, like you said, a lot of people go off of it. They have some physical withdrawals. But I think the biggest thing is people are like, whoa, how do I deal with all these emotions? This is too much. I'm just going to go
Yeah.
back, you
Yeah.
know?
I think that it's so many people resonate with this because, and I would like to even side note that it doesn't even have to be medication. Like for me, like how I avoided my emotions was through exercise. So like I would quite literally run from myself, and I got into long distance running, marathons, ultra marathons. I was literally running away from my emotions and would run long enough to where like I thought I was working through things, but I was just moving my body in such a way to avoid it. And it could look different from everybody, right? It could be medication, it could be alcohol, it could be, social media, it could be anything that we're using to distract ourselves from feeling whatever we need to feel. So I think that everything that you have mentioned and touched on is so important for people to resonate. Like you can kind of be like, oh, that's not me. Like I don't take medication, but I just wanted to add it in there that you could be avoiding yourself and avoiding your emotions in so many different ways, and being able to be okay with that. Because I had gone years without crying also, and I thought it was like a very stoic thing to be like, oh well, I'm not this hyper emotional person, like I just keep it calm and steady and I hold things together. And I think that's that unbalanced, sometimes masculine energy where you think that you have to be this strong point, and to when you finally allow yourself to like crack your heart open, like you had said you were so sensitive, I had felt that same experience of like, oh my gosh, I cry. Like I can cry at so many things. Like yesterday I went to the Barbie movie and I cried at the ending. It's just like I get so sensitive, and I was like, this is such a beautiful thing to be able to cry. Why is this, kind of looked down on, or this experience, or think that tears are always sad, or it's just this, you have permission to feel the variety of emotion. But I just want to add that because we could do so many things to distract ourselves from feeling those things. And I agree, there is such powerful wisdom within those low points, and you have to honor that dark night of that shedding, of realizing maybe you're unhappy and stuck in those different areas because you actually really don't want to do what you're doing right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So you went from moving from Seattle and to Mexico, and I want you to talk about your journey of like quitting your corporate job and transitioning to what you're doing now. And I think it's so important for people to tune into their journey at this time of connecting to their purpose and feeling this sense of alignment. So I want you to dive into that of now how you're working with people and working on this message of this greater purpose for everyone individually.
Hmm. Yeah, it has been a wild journey. And I think a lot of us are experiencing that right now. So I had left corporate and I actually started working for a coaching business. I was their director of sales. And so I kind of transitioned into something more aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And after working for them, though, it was just, something that one of my mentors has shared with me is as you step into a higher vision, the things that are not aligned will begin to fall away.
Mm.
Right.
Yep.
And so if it's rather friends, jobs, relationships, I think a lot of us are starting to see this as you move towards a higher purpose or calling into alignment, into your dharma, things naturally shed away. And that is what happened with that job. And it was funny because the doer in me, right? I immediately was like, okay, what am I going to do next? And I think a lot of us run into this when we're trying to figure out our next steps. We feel this rush to jump into the next thing. Even though
Mm.
I had safety, I had some money saved up, I immediately put all this pressure on myself to figure it out.
Mm.
And also, I'm proud of that because it pushed me to explore. That was when I really started diving into the chakras. And I think the first thing I did is I just allowed myself to investigate. Like whenever I was feeling inspired by something, I would tap into a creative side of that and like, okay, let me research this. Let me understand this. Let me learn about this without any intention of like needing to share it, but let me just see where it takes me. And through that, I actually started writing a book. And that was a lot of my journey last year, still working on it. But it was such a great and like such a release of all of this information and all of this understandings and lessons that were coming through my life at this point. As I was really waking up, I was writing everything down. And a lot of things happened during this period. I had just been through a really big heartbreak. And as many of us know, like heartbreak is such a portal to heart opening,
Oof. It so
to
is.
loving ourselves deeper. And oh
Oh,
my
we
God.
avoid that sometimes. And I remember, I just
Yeah.
want to add to this. So I met Jenna when we were in Bali and we were at a beach club. I had just, all my, like, I moved to a different area. We were in Uluwatu. I didn't know anybody. And I was, doing my own personal work. We're at the beach club. And I remember hearing you and your friend chat, and I just had such a pull to talk to you. And then fast forward, we were on the beach together, and you were telling me about your journey through your relationship and things. And it's like that period of time, like that conversation of just like moving through that piece of like relationship and just being very raw and vulnerable with each other, and like that conversation shifted me into a way where this is now why I want to have a conversation, have this
Mm.
you interview right now. But that such rawness within those relationships is just like can crack us open, like, and it's like something that we avoid, and sometimes we avoid getting in relationships because we don't want to potentially feel that. But I know that
Mm.
in all of my endings of relationships, it just opens your heart even wider when you think that it will kind of close. So yeah, keep talking into that, but I wanted to add that of that,
Mm.
to let people know like where we kind of connected.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. And oh man, that was such a great
Yeah.
time, such synchronicity.
Right.
I remember we were talking about Joe Dispenza, and
Oh,
there's just so much alignment there. And
yeah.
yeah, I mean, heartbreak has been one of my greatest lessons and relationship. I am so grateful for everything that has happened in my life. And I still love my ex-partners, like I have such a love for them and such a gratitude for the depth that we
Mhm.
experience together. And I have a lot of trust in that process and where it's leading us. And so, um, if I could like zoom out and kind of look at the journey from a bird's eye perspective, because
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of people right now that are being called to step into something more meaningful. They're doing the work on themselves and they're like, okay, this thing is not serving me. I know there's something more I want to do, but I don't know what that looks like. And everybody's journey looks different, but some of the things that were very apparent to me on my journey was first, like I needed to get out of that stressed state, that chronically stressed state that I was in for like 10
Mhm.
years of my life. Like there's no way that you can really, for me personally, I couldn't connect with my intuition. I couldn't connect with my heart if I was in this stressed out state constantly.
Mhm.
And so that's part of what my journey was like an unraveling of all of this tension, of all of this pain, of all of this trauma, and just allowing myself to reconnect with my body because I
Mhm.
truly feel our body is where our wisdom is stored. Like 99% of the time, we're up here operating in our head. And the real calling right now is to learn how to drop into our body somatically, reconnect with this other part of our system that can guide us in such a beautiful way.
Mhm.
And so I went on this journey of just like surrendering, surrendering, not needing to have a job, not working through a lot of money blocks, a lot of fear of like, oh my gosh, am I going to end up homeless right now? Like,
Mm,
because that's something that my family has dealt with, and it brought up a ton of pain for me. I was like,
mm,
am I self sabotaging myself? And so there was almost this period of clearing that took place for me personally, physically, mentally, energetically, emotionally. I needed to let go. And through that process of letting go and just starting to connect with the joy of life again, and also holding on to the vision that I've had. So many years ago, a vision, a purpose was dropped into my awareness. And that was really to help heal the world of depression and anxiety. And I'm like, I have no idea what that means, but that has been my journey. And that is how I hope to help others heal. And through this process of surrendering and exploring life and staying connected to that higher vision, and I mean, journaling about it, doing
mm,
manifestations about it, just exploring like, what could this look like? What do I appreciate? What inspires me about other people that have taught me? How are they showing up? Like, who is the woman that I need to become in
mm.
order to step into this vision, even if I don't know what that vision is?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
like through that process, I started connecting deeply with my heart.
Mm,
There almost has to be this clearing that takes place of the trauma, of the stuck emotions, of the limiting beliefs. And then there is this beautiful connection that comes online with our heart. And I am a big believer that our heart is what guides us towards our purpose. Our heart is
mm,
like this portal in between the 3D world, the
mhm,
material world, and the 5D. And, if you want to call it source, God, energy, spirit, it's like our heart is the connector that we can actually communicate with. And it'll tell you where to go.
mhm.
But the biggest part of this journey is learning how to trust that calling and being able to jump into the unknown when you feel called to do that, because in the unknown is where all the possibility lays.
Yeah, that's where the magic is. And isn't that the most uncomfortable space to jump into that we avoid? Um, oh, so much
Mhm.
goodness there it is. It becomes and the way that the mind works, and I don't know where this is from. It's not something from me, but there basically was the reminder that the mind is just like the processor of things. It's just, it's just the space where you're not really supposed to add any value. It's just like the thoughts and things that you're just gonna here to observe and take note of and things. So I 100% agree. The magic is through the heart, and I think that is something that needs to be explored with us more, and that's how a lot of us now can step forward and like live this more authentic purpose driven life that actually feels connected. And isn't it funny that like all the things that are available to us is to disconnect us from our feelings and have all these distractions that we're able to kind of use to not connect to that. And then once you do connect to that, that things just start to open up. And when those things are cleared, like you had mentioned, different friends and jobs and all these things will kind of fall away once you start aligning with yourself, with your heart, with your purpose, then
Mhm.
you have space to even have the unknown. Like you had mentioned before, when you were in your structured job and you had probably different things that you do with friends and you have this structure in play, you when you have that much rigidity and that much like knowing of what your life is, you really don't have any time or space to play in the unknown because all of
Mm.
it is just lined out for you Monday through Friday, and then you have certain things you do on the weekend. So if someone's not in a place to quit their job just yet, or um, wants to take this leap but is really nervous, I know you mentioned subconscious work and working through your blocks. There are just some key things that they can kind of start with to explore this side of themselves, or start to even figure out what the unknown, like how do you get connected to your vision if you don't know how to connect to your heart? Is there certain
Mm.
practices that connect that to you that you can offer, that maybe you give to people that you work with?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
a great question because, yeah, it can be a little bit overwhelming to know where to start.
Yeah.
And when I really think about my journey, because this journey began a long time before I actually decided to quit my job.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that we spoke about already on this podcast are very relevant. And
Mm,
so the first thing I think of is create space for yourself.
mm,
You know, putting a structured morning routine is one of the number one recommendations I have, even if it's just 15 minutes, even if it's you just sitting there for 15 minutes, journaling for 5 minutes. What that's allowing you to do is connect deeper with your body, create space for yourself to experience emotions, and also start taking control of your life in regards to having intentionality with your life, right? If you're not creating
mm,
space to understand how you feel about things, how are you ever going to act differently?
mhm,
And so, doing a morning routine, also just creating more space in your life to go inward. You know, I think about things like maybe trying to find a yoga nidra class or a sound healing class or going to like a women's circle. Like all of these things allow you to just slow down, get out of the routine of go, 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 and start listening to yourself deeper. And so I want to paint a little bit of a story here, if that's
mhm,
okay, about the power of what this can look like in your life. So, I've shared little bits and pieces of this, right? Like years ago, I went to a retreat. I had kind of this vision of like helping heal the world of depression, anxiety. I also had a vision drop in of me standing on a stage with my published book. And that was like before I even knew I wanted to write a book. And so I was like, whoa, okay, listening to these things. And it still took me a couple of years to even decide to write the book. But what I kept doing, even while I was in my corporate job, was like, who do I need to be? That is a question that you should always be asking yourself. Not
mm,
what do I need to do? How am I going to get there? But who do I need to be? And intentionality is important. So the way that I started showing up as a leader, I was managing teams, completely transformed, right? I started doing like breath work and vision sessions with my team, which was very different than what other managers were doing, but it worked. So even
mm,
in my corporate life, I was starting to
mhm,
bring in this energy of like my higher self and who I want to be in this lifetime. And even though, like, looking back, like the past year and a half, there was so much unknown. Basically, what creating space for myself has allowed me to do is like there's these little voices within you. And the way I like to differentiate our intuition versus our fear or our mind is like intuition is this soft calling, you know,
mm,
and your body literally feels relaxed when you tap into it. Where if you're coming from a place of scarcity or fear, your mind is usually trying to protect you. So it's like, oh, don't do that thing. You don't know what's going to happen. Like, that's scary. Like, this might happen, that might happen. And you literally feel the different energy within yourself. And so, learning how to connect with your intuition is really important because it will guide you.
mhm,
So, in my journey, for example, like when I was living in Mexico and I was all inspired by the chakras, there was a voice inside of me that's like, why aren't you sharing this? You know? And so I just went and I like connected with the Selena and I did 8 weeks of like teaching on each chakra once per week. It was very out of my comfort zone. And it's not like, you know, some days nobody showed up. Sometimes, you know, 7 people would show up. And it expanded me so much. And fast forward a year from now, the program that I'm actually creating to help people with this process of stepping into the unknown, with this process of calling in a greater purpose or vision, it's structured based off of that same 8 week program I did in person in Sayulita.
mm,
And so you never know where these little signs are going to lead you to. But I say all of this to encourage you to continue to leap into the unknown. Continue to look at fear with a place of compassion. It's like, this is really uncomfortable, but how much would I grow if I actually leaned into this? And
yeah,
what starts happening is you actually just start evolving into the person that you're meant to be. So
yeah,
many of us like are in such a we're stuck in a scarcity mindset. That is
mhm,
what I think we are all trying to heal right now is like we are just like being filled with marketing and scarcity and fear and like you're going to get sick, like what if money runs out, the news, like it's bombarding us with all of this information that is putting us into a scarcity mindset. And right now we're being called to move into abundance.
Mm.
to like move past that scarcity into a place of love, into a place of purpose. And you feel that transitioning taking place right now in the planet. And
Yeah.
it always starts with us as an individual going first. Before we can help others, we have to go on the journey ourselves first.
So true. And you do feel that kind of shift in resonance with everybody, but it is such a personal journey. And it's that popular quote is like, to change the world, you have to change yourself, and you have to be able to, connect back in. And yeah, definitely shifting from scarcity into abundance and love is the biggest shift I think you can make in your life. And it's been the biggest shift even for myself, and it completely changes decisions that you step into, how you show up in relationships, what you decide to offer. It's just a complete different vibration of that. So, if someone's listening and be like, "What? How do I even do that?" What are some like ways that you have shifted that within your life? I know you've talked about a little bit, a lot of your experiences, but just having like one or two things that you can do maybe in a day to help shift that kind of scarcity to abundance. How would you do that? How would you recommend someone would move through that? And then tell us more about your 8-week course, because I would love to explore more of that if someone's interested in with working with you.
Oh, I love this question. This feels like my life's work right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, as many
Right,
of
I
us.
know. I'm just buzzing right now every time
I
I get
know,
on the
me
call. Yeah,
too.
right.
And such a juicy question, because we could have a whole podcast on this one.
Absolutely.
And maybe we should
Maybe
sometime.
we'll just part
Yeah.
two.
But when I really tap into this, there's two main components, I think. I think the first is what we resist persists.
Mm,
And so there is a component of needing to allow yourself to feel, right? Like, I think the worst thing that we can do is like when we're spinning out or we're in scarcity is like, I'm just going to repeat positive affirmations and I'm going to switch my mindset. Like, there is some truth to that. And I'm going to speak about that in a second. But
yeah,
the first thing that we need to do is acknowledge how we are feeling, right?
yeah.
And things that have been really helpful for me is like when I feel reactive, when I'm triggered, when I'm emotional, like make the conscious choice to pause, tap into my body by breathing, and ask myself, what's going on? I know it sounds simple, but like creating that space, like sometimes I will just start welling up with tears. Sometimes
Mm,
my mind will start spinning out of anger or frustration. Like, oh, I'm mad right now.
yeah.
And like the key here is we don't want to project that on other people. We want to be able to understand it within ourselves. So I heard this recently and this really hit me. So with emotions, on average, it should take you about 15 minutes to move through an emotional state. It actually only
Mm,
takes our body 90 seconds for an emotion to physically pass. But like if you're super upset and you're crying, like it should take about 15 minutes to go through that experience.
mm,
If you are continuing to feel it, it probably means that you are being reminded of a previous trauma in your life that you need to go visit. And so that's when you can start doing deeper work like inner child healing, like shadow work, which is essentially just going and revisiting that time when a traumatic event occurred and giving yourself the love and compassion that you needed and did not receive at that point.
yeah.
So there's this whole process of like, first, just allow yourself to feel things, right? But the second component that I think takes a little bit more energy is the intentionality of moving into an abundant perspective. So there's kind of this pattern of like moving out of the scarcity and using somatic work, using breath work, using meditation to move into a neutral state.
Mm,
Before we can move into abundance, we have to be neutral,
yeah.
right? And then moving into abundance is actually like asking yourself, okay, so I know this relationship just ended. Like I'm going through the mourning process, the grieving process, but also how might this be a blessing in my life?
Mm,
Right? This is showing me how to love myself deeper. This is reminding me the importance of creating boundaries. And also, what do I desire in this future relationship? Right? And so it's starting to see and believe that the universe is on our side. everything is working out in our favor.
Yeah.
And as you start, transitioning into that state of abundance more and more and more, it becomes your more regular state. And the other piece that I really want to talk about here is sometimes our subconscious mind it's painful to deal with because we've been in such a state of victimhood for so long that we
Mm-hmm.
believe that mindset. We believe those thoughts. And it's really, really hard to get out of this. And I honor one of my partners who I love dearly because he had such a strong masculine energy. And especially when I was getting out of he held space for my emotions. But what he really taught me was when I was becoming a victim of my own emotions.
Ah,
Right. And so, like,
yeah.
something that we would do that was really helpful, like when I was just stuck and ruminating and I couldn't get out of the pain, I would write down like the 10 things that I was thinking in that moment. Right. And they like the negative things. And then we would draw a line and literally write the opposite. So versus saying like, I'm running out of money, like money is coming. And so the
Yeah.
difference of like just talking about positive affirmations was like I allowed myself to feel some of these things. And then I started actually moving my mindset into abundance by looking at the positive perspective. And there's a lot of power in that work. And so this journey of like transitioning, uncovering our unconscious thoughts and then transitioning into a more abundant perspective, it does take work. It takes
Yeah.
intentionality, but the work is worth it because you start becoming that person. And versus believing everything that we are conditioned to believe as children, we're actually choosing our beliefs as adults. And there's a lot of
Yes.
power in that.
Yes. Making the conscious decision to be like, and I think it's even being conscious and taking the time to scan and analyze what you actually do believe, because we can just keep living our lives and thinking that like we don't even take space or time, what we talked about earlier, that's one of the biggest things that you could do to shift your life is just take space for yourself. But to even like, have you even asked yourself like, what do I believe and why do I believe it? Like, was
Mm-hmm.
it, and that's huge. That's even the biggest, one of the biggest steps is just that, acknowledgement of what you had said and being able to be like, okay, this is what I believe. Do I want to believe that? And where did that come from? And I think it's so important that you mentioned to move into that neutrality first before you jump to the abundance. Cause I can feel, especially when it comes to money, if you've always lived in scarcity, it can feel impossible to think that abundance is there for you. So it's like to move
Mm-hmm.
into that neutral state helps you shift into, first is I think more of that achievable mindset. You could be like, all right, I can eventually think that I could believe about being neutral about money before I could feel
Mm-hmm.
in abundance. So I think that's such a good transition and letting yourself transition into those stages and be conscious of what's coming up. That's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful practice that your partner and you had done. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's great. And you can even do that, on your own, like we had said, if you're working through these thoughts or if you have this, it's like the loop that our brain will put ourselves in sometimes, and
Mm-hmm.
it'll loop. And I've even noticed this, and you come you come in on this spiral way of healing where you're just like, fuck, I thought I healed that, I thought we moved through this limiting belief, and then you kind of get to another layer of it, and you can notice when you get into these different levels of healing these aspects of yourself, you can kind of recognize and notice, be like, whoa, this is that pattern that's coming up within myself. Do I want to
Mm-hmm.
continue to move forward within this, or do I want to shift it right now? And you can really only do that when you take space for yourself of like noticing those things. So that's a beautiful process. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So to one of the last questions I want to ask you, and then just to talk about your course a little bit more, but what is something that you wish that you knew sooner within your journey? And how could that, what would that help someone right now? What do you wish that, like, man, life, I know things all happen for a reason and your path is sacred, but what do you wish that you knew sooner along this journey?
Mm. Hmm. I feel I wish that I understood earlier what it meant to trust myself.
Mm.
You know, I've always been guided, I've always been protected, right? All of us have. We look back
Yeah.
and everything that seemed horrible in the moment has turned out to be something really beautiful in the end. And I feel like the points where I was most chaotic in my life was when there was this disconnect of my heart and my head. You know, like my heart knew what I wanted to do, but I was too busy thinking about the impact it was going to have. Was I going to find another job? Blah, blah, blah. But that wasn't the point. Like,
Yeah.
the point wasn't anything in my head. It was like learning how to listen to my heart, trust my heart, and act from that, you know, versus like, I realized this like 8 years ago, and I'm still learning this. I
Yeah.
remember having this epiphany where I was like, every time I have a big decision in life, I take like 3 months to make that decision because I'm pretty much being hyper analytical and I'm thinking about the pros of it, I'm thinking about the cons of it. And then I come to a conclusion. And 99% of the time, I come back to what my initial gut reaction was. I
Mm.
knew what I wanted to do. So, what
Yeah.
would happen if I didn't waste those 3 months causing chaos in my mind and I just trusted myself? And so, that is something I am still living by.
Yeah.
And I just encourage and hope everybody can really begin tapping into, if you're not already, like, you know,
Yeah.
and learning how to trust yourself and build that relationship with yourself is really the journey that is going to guide you towards exactly where you're meant to go.
Oof. Yeah. Oh, that's powerful. And to just trust, you know. You don't need to know why. You don't need to
Mhm.
overanalyze, give all the reasons or, all the benefits. That it is such that logical mind to do of just pros and cons and this or that. I definitely lived the majority of my life, especially my early 20s was always like that. Like every decision you're like, oh, I don't know if I go this way, then I go this way. But it is, if you anchor into that, then things become just much more simple. It's just like you just know which way to go. You don't need to ask your million friends and your mom and dad and Google and all those things. You just tune in and tap in. Oh, I love that. So to end, I wanted you to just talk about more about your course. If someone's interested in that to work with you, when would that, do you have a date yet, and a timeline of when that offering is going to come about? Or, yeah, just a bit about the container, if they're interested.
Absolutely. And I am so excited about this because for me, this is the culmination of everything that I have been learning on the journey so far and a lot of the things that we have been talking about today. So, the way that the course is structured, it's an online course, 8 weeks, and it is really meant for people who are in the position that we're talking about today. Like, you know that you have a greater calling, you know that you have a greater purpose, and you don't really know what to do next.
Mm,
Right. And so you are feeling ready to leap into the unknown. You are doing that work within yourself to really connect with your heart. You don't feel fulfilled in the things that you're doing. Like, you're constantly chasing that next thing. You know, the purpose of this course is to help you prepare to make that leap,
yeah.
because I wish that I had the support that I needed because it was really scary doing it alone.
Mm,
And so the course is essentially structured based on the chakra system, just because that has been the process that has really helped me to tap into my purpose, tap into my mission. But it goes so much deeper than that, right? And so, starting from week one, we're going to be talking about your nervous system regulation, what to do when you're feeling triggered, what to do when you're in your mind. And you're almost learning the skill sets to become embodied. So, this
mm,
course, you know, my purpose, my goal, my mission of this is learn how to heal yourself, learn the tools that you can return to over and over and over. Because the one thing I know about this journey is when you start stepping into your purpose, when you start stepping into your vision, a lot of challenging things come up. And you're going to be
mhm,
faced with the decision of, okay, am I able to ground? Am I able to embody? Am I able, even for me, right? When I have no energy, do I know how to cultivate that energy within myself so I can move forward with purpose? And so we're guiding you through this journey of learning how to cultivate grounding within yourself, how to tap into creativity, how to move into a creative energy, how to take action on that energy and start creating something from this. And as we move up the system, we start understanding like what is needed to tap into your purpose, to communicate to your heart. And what we find is as people go through this system, they're essentially leaving with an inspiration of like, okay, not only do I have more clarity on what I want to do, but I have more clarity on how to do it. And the goal here is also to have a community that can support you, because so many people are
Mm,
on this journey right now. And
yeah.
like, we should have a community of like visionaries and game changers, people that are leaving their old life to create something beautiful, because the world needs your voice right now. The world needs your voice right now.
Mm.
And if you're feeling called, like this is your invitation. Um, and so I'm super passionate about this. I'm really excited. The course is going to be released probably September or October. We're starting
Okay.
to do some like pre-registration now. I'm sure that we will, link this in the show notes, but the best way to get in
Mhm.
touch is just through Instagram. And then like joining the newsletter is going to keep you updated. We also have a lot of goodies on the things we talked about today. So different resources on how to get deeper into your body, your knowingness, your vision. Um, and then if you feel called, about the course, there's information on the website in the show notes. You can access that. But also I am just open to have a conversation with you. If this is, intriguing to you, if you feel like you are on the verge of making this leap, I'd be more than happy to connect one-on-one and just dive further into that with you. So,
Ah, beautiful. I'm excited. Yes, I'll
Mhm.
definitely include all of that in the show notes. And yeah, oh, thank you so much for this conversation. There's so much power within this. And it's such this unique personal journey that everybody's looks differently, but we tend to all go through these like massive same feelings and that we move through, and it does feel very isolating, especially when you are in this transition of like, shit, my whole life that I think that I have now I don't want, and it can feel kind of lonely when you're moving through that and people and things are falling away and you're feeling a little bit chaotic. So to have that resource of
Mhm.
community and structure to be like, okay, this is how I can move through these changes, I think will be so helpful for people. So thank you for building that. Thank you for sharing your voice and your journey with us. And I just super appreciate this time with you in this space. So thank you so much, Jenna. And yeah, take a listen, follow her on Instagram, and check out her website. And yeah, just I can't thank you enough for this conversation.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
thank you. I just want to express some gratitude that it is so beautiful what you are doing with this podcast and your mission. Like from the moment that we met, I felt the light in you. And I think it's so awesome just to be exploring the different perspectives of this inner journey and expansion. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really beautiful what you're doing. So thank you for having such
Yeah.
an amazing, powerful, heartfelt conversation today.
Oh, thank you so much. I received that.